The mahogany-panelled office reeked of failure and aged bourbon. Marcus Thornhill's palatial estate had witnessed countless displays of excess over the decades. Champagne towers at galas that cost more than most people earned in a year. Closed-door negotiations that reshaped entire industries. The quiet desperation of household staff who knew their place and kept it. But nothing in the mansion's storied history compared to this moment. 6 interminable days had crawled past since Marcus found himself locked out of his own fortress. 6 days, watching the carefully orchestrated machinery of his business empire grind toward catastrophic failure because he could not recall a sequence of numbers he himself had chosen. The afternoon sun slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows at precisely 2:47 when everything shifted on its axis. Marcus stood at the epicenter of controlled chaos, encircled by the most accomplished security technicians money could procure anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. The fortress elite vault towered before him like a monument to his own hubris, nearly 6 feet of reinforced titanium alloy that currently mocked him with its impenetrable silence. This vault had been commissioned as his ultimate protection, his bulwark against a world he fundamentally mistrusted. Now it served as his cage. Desperation and alcohol had driven him to make a proclamation that would obliterate him. $200 million to whoever could breach this barrier. The room fell silent as his words echoed off the expensive woodwork. But crouched in the corner, practically invisible to everyone present, sat 8-year-old Isaiah Carter, small even for his age, wearing a faded superhero shirt and gripping the worn straps of his backpack. He was the son of Diana, the woman who had scrubbed Marcus Thornhill's floors, polished his silver, and endured his contempt for nearly a decade. The child Marcus had belittled with casually vicious remarks since the first day Diana brought him to work during a school holiday. Isaiah possessed knowledge that could unlock everything. 6 nights earlier, he had witnessed Marcus stumble home from a charity function, watched with his extraordinary memory as the intoxicated billionaire performed his opening ritual before the vault. Isaiah's mind captured information the way a camera captures light, perfectly, permanently, with no degradation over time. But Isaiah had learned through bitter experience to make himself invisible. Marcus had taught him that lesson with every sneer, every dismissive glance, every cruel observation about these people and their kind. Until this precise moment, his small voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. "Excuse me, Mr. Thornhill." The words came out soft but clear. "May I attempt it?" Time seemed to crystallize. Every head pivoted toward the corner where the small black child stood, separating himself from the shadows. Marcus's expression cycled rapidly through shock, recognition, and something far uglier. That particular look Isaiah knew intimately. The one that communicated he had no right to speak, no right to occupy this space, no right to exist in the presence of his betters. But before witnessing what happened next, the full context demands illumination. Understanding requires traveling backward through the accumulation of moments that led to this confrontation. This is not merely a story about a locked vault. This is a narrative about years of silent suffering, about racism disguised as normal social interaction, about a child who learned to erase himself from rooms while his mind absorbed everything. The story must begin earlier, when the vault was first installed, when Diana initially brought her son to work during spring vacation, when the foundation of rage and quiet brilliance was laid that would collide in 60 decisive seconds. 8 months before that afternoon, Marcus Thornhill had already cultivated his obsession with absolute control into a lifestyle, a religion, a fundamental architecture of existence. At 51 years old, carrying excess weight and radiating perpetual suspicion, he had constructed his billion-dollar empire on the bedrock principle that trust represented a luxury exclusively available to fools. His estate sprawled across 14 acres of immaculately maintained grounds in the most exclusive neighborhood of the city, protected by 18-foot wrought iron gates, motion-activated sensors, and security cameras that captured every conceivable angle. Inside the main residence, Italian marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers imported from Vienna. Every piece of furniture cost more than the median annual income. Every painting displayed on the walls came with authentication certificates, insurance policies, and alarm systems, yet none of it satisfied his paranoia. "I trust absolutely no one," Marcus informed the 3 Master Vault engineers who had flown in from Zurich specifically for this consultation, sitting across from him in his private study. "Not my board members, not my relatives, not the people who clean my bathrooms." The engineers exchanged subtle glances. They had traveled across the Atlantic with portfolios showcasing their most sophisticated products. Each vault they presented represented the cutting edge of security technology, biometric recognition systems, time delay mechanisms, seismic sensors that could detect drilling from 3 rooms away. Marcus rejected every single option with a dismissive wave. "Too conventional," he declared, his tone dripping with disdain. "If you manufacture 10 of them, someone somewhere will learn to crack one. I want something unique, one of a kind. No blueprints left in existence, no duplicate keys, no manufacturer override codes. Nothing. Zero backup access." The lead engineer, a precise man named Heinrich with silver-rimmed spectacles and 3 decades of experience, leaned forward carefully. "Mr. Thornhill, what you are describing will be extraordinarily expensive, and if circumstances arise where you forget the combination—" "I will not forget," Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp with certainty. "My memory is flawless. What I require is a vault that remains completely impenetrable, something designed so that thieves, domestic staff, even armed criminals holding me at gunpoint cannot access the contents. Can you create that, or should I find someone who can?" Heinrich paused, his professional pride engaged despite his reservations. "We can," he said slowly, "but you must understand there will be no backup access of any kind. If something goes wrong, we cannot assist you." Marcus smiled with genuine satisfaction. "Perfect." 4 months and $350,000 later, the Fortress Elite arrived. Resistance Classification 8, the highest security rating available in civilian markets. It stood nearly 6 feet tall, constructed from military-grade titanium alloy, with a complex mechanical lock system that required no electronics, no digital codes, no physical keys. Just a precise series of dial rotations in a specific sequence that only Marcus would know. The installation required 2 full days. Marcus stood in his study, watching the technicians bolt the massive structure to reinforced concrete that had been specially poured in the floor. Through the open doorway, he observed members of his household staff performing their duties. His executive assistant hurried past, clutching quarterly reports. His driver meticulously polished the fleet of luxury vehicles in the garage, visible through the window. And Diana, his housekeeper, pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway, her movements efficient and invisible in the way Marcus preferred. Diana had worked for Marcus for 9.5 years. She was 40 years old, soft-spoken, and punctual to the point of obsession. Marcus barely registered her presence most days, which was precisely how he liked his staff, anticipating needs without being seen or heard, functioning as extensions of the house itself rather than as human beings. When the installation crew finally departed after their second day, Marcus locked his study door. He approached the vault with the reverence others might reserve for religious relics. This was his fortress, his ultimate protection against a world that wanted to strip away what belonged to him. He spent 90 minutes testing the mechanism, spinning the dials in the pattern he had memorized. left 4 complete rotations stopping at 38, right 3 complete rotations stopping at 52, left 2 rotations stopping at 17, then right directly to 71. Click. The heavy door swung open with perfect mechanical smoothness. Inside, Marcus began arranging his most valuable possessions with meticulous care. Bearer bonds worth $38 million, cash in multiple currencies totaling another $12 million, offshore account documentation for holdings in the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, and Singapore, corporate records that could destroy competitors if leaked to regulatory agencies or the press, sensitive files that certain government investigators would find extremely interesting, insurance policies, real estate deeds, cryptocurrency access codes, blackmail material on business rivals. Everything that represented his power and wealth disappeared into that vault. As he closed the door and spun the lock, Marcus felt a surge of deep satisfaction radiating through his chest. This was it, the perfect defense. No one could touch him now. Not his business competitors who would celebrate his downfall, not his estranged siblings who kept demanding shares of the family inheritance, not the succession of ex-wives and their predatory lawyers, and certainly not the staff who moved through his home like shadows. Marcus poured himself an expensive single-malt whiskey, savouring the burn as it travelled down his throat. Through the window, he watched the sun descend over his estate. 14 acres of absolute dominion. A mansion worth $22 million, a vault that was genuinely impenetrable. He was invincible, or so his arrogance convinced him. What Marcus could not predict, could never have anticipated, was that 8 months later, his perfect fortress would transform into his perfect prison, that his paranoia would trap him as effectively as it was designed to trap everyone else, and that the individual who would ultimately unlock his vault, and in doing so unlock all his secrets, would be someone he had never considered worth noticing. Someone he had dismissed, degraded, and underestimated from the very first moment they met. But that revelation waited 8 months in the future. For now, Marcus stood in his study with whiskey in hand, admiring his fortress of titanium and his empire of wealth, completely oblivious that empires constructed on arrogance and contempt possess a tendency to crumble from within, slowly at first, then catastrophically. Diana Carter's alarm pierced the darkness at 4:15 every weekday morning, the same time it had sounded for nearly a decade. She rose in the pre-dawn blackness of her modest apartment, moving with practiced silence to avoid waking Isaiah, who was curled beneath his thin blanket in the bedroom they shared. But this morning, like every morning for the past week, she had no choice but to wake him. "Sweetheart, time to get up," she whispered, gently shaking his small shoulder. Isaiah stirred, rubbing his eyes with small fists. School was closed for spring break, and the after-school program he usually attended had shut down temporarily for renovations. Diana had no family in the area, no friends who could watch him during her 12-hour shifts at the Thornhill estate. She had called every babysitter she could remotely afford. None were available on such short notice. So Isaiah came to work with her. By 5:30, they were pulling up to the service entrance of the Thornhill estate in Diana's 18-year-old sedan, a vehicle held together by hope and minimal maintenance. The mansion loomed before them in the early morning darkness, illuminated by security lights that made the white stone facade glow like something from a dream. Isaiah pressed his face against the window, his worn backpack containing homework and library books clutched in his lap. "Remember what I told you," Diana said softly, her hand on his thin shoulder. "Stay quiet, stay invisible, stay out of Mr. Thornhill's path, don't touch anything, don't ask questions, just sit in the break room and read your books. Can you do that for Mama?" Isaiah nodded, though his eyes were wide with curiosity. To him, the mansion resembled a museum. Everything inside was pristine and untouchable, from the crystal vases in the hallways to the leather-bound first editions in the library. Even the air smelled expensive, like furniture polish and fresh flowers that cost more than their weekly grocery budget. Diana moved through the mansion with the efficiency born of years of practice. She knew every room, every surface, every expectation. She started in the kitchen, preparing the coffee maker for the chef who would arrive at 7. Then she moved to the main living areas, dusting, straightening, ensuring everything achieved perfection before Marcus woke. Isaiah followed her like a shadow, observing everything with those unusually attentive eyes. He sat in corners with his books open, his gaze tracking his mother's movements, noting how she worked twice as hard to remain invisible, how she never made eye contact with the few other staff members who passed through, how she flinched whenever she heard footsteps approaching from down the hall. On the 3rd day, Marcus saw him. Isaiah was sitting in the staff break room, a cramped, windowless space near the kitchen with a folding table, a microwave that barely worked, and a water cooler. He had finished his mathematics homework and was reading a library book about space exploration, his legs swinging from a chair too tall for him. His superhero T-shirt, bright with primary colors, stood out against the sterile white walls like a flag. Marcus appeared in the doorway, mid-conversation on his phone about a merger negotiation. He stopped abruptly when he saw Isaiah, his eyes narrowing with displeasure. "Diana!" he called out sharply, his voice cutting through the quiet. Diana appeared within seconds, her face carefully neutral despite the dread flooding through her. "Yes, Mr. Thornhill. What is this?" Marcus gestured at Isaiah as if he were an object left in the wrong location. "My son, sir," Diana replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "School is closed this week and I have no one to watch him. I apologize for the inconvenience. He will not be any trouble." Marcus looked Isaiah up and down with obvious distaste, his lip curling slightly. "I do not run a daycare facility. Keep him out of my sight. Keep him out of my way. And tell him not to touch anything. You know how these kids are." The words hung in the air like poison. Isaiah's grip tightened on his book, but he said nothing. "Yes, sir," Diana whispered, her voice cracking. "It will not happen again." Over the following days, Marcus made his feelings abundantly clear through a steady stream of comments delivered loud enough to be heard. When he passed Isaiah in the hallway, he would mutter to whoever was within earshot, "Having the help's children running around my home. What comes next? Letting them eat at my dining table." When Isaiah quietly carried his mother's cleaning supplies to the next room, Marcus commented to his assistant, "Watch your wallet around that one. You know how they are. Sticky fingers run in the family." The worst incident occurred on the 5th day. Isaiah was reading in the staff break room again, this time working through a book on advanced mathematics that his teacher had given him. Mrs. Henderson had told him he was gifted, that his ability to remember everything he read was extraordinary, that his mind worked differently than other children his age, but his underfunded public school had no program for students like him, no resources to nurture whatever potential he possessed. Marcus walked in to grab bottled water from the small refrigerator. He glanced at Isaiah's book and laughed, a harsh sound with no warmth in it. "Advanced mathematics. That's precious," he said, unscrewing the cap on his water bottle. "Someone should teach these kids to aim lower, not fill their heads with impossible ideas. You know what happens when people try to be something they are not? Disappointment, failure. Better to learn your place early." He walked out, leaving Isaiah staring at the pages he could no longer see clearly through the tears forming in his eyes. When Diana found him 10 minutes later, she knew immediately that something had happened. She pulled him into her arms in the small break room, away from cameras and prying eyes, and the judgment that seemed to permeate every surface. "What did I tell you, baby?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Stay invisible. He cannot hurt what he cannot see." "But, Mama, why does he talk to us like that?" Isaiah asked, his small voice muffled against her shoulder. "I did not do anything wrong." "I know, baby. I know you did not," Diana replied, holding him tighter to prevent her own tears from falling. "Some people just have hate in their hearts. It is not about you, it is about them. But we need this job desperately. We need the money for rent, for food, for your school supplies. So we smile, we stay quiet, and we survive. You understand?" Malachi nodded against her shoulder. He understood more than she wanted him to. He understood that in Marcus Thornhill's world, they were less than human, objects to be used and dismissed at will, tools that happened to breathe. But what Diana did not fully realize was the gift her son possessed, the way his mind worked. Isaiah remembered everything with perfect clarity. 3 days earlier, he had overheard Marcus on the phone with his lawyer, discussing offshore accounts and tax strategies. Isaiah could repeat the entire conversation word for word if asked. 2 days ago, he had watched a security technician input a code on a side entrance panel. Isaiah knew the 8-digit sequence without effort. His mind functioned like a high-definition camera, capturing details others missed and storing them permanently in perfect resolution. Patterns, numbers, conversations, movements. Nothing was too small or insignificant for his photographic memory to record and preserve. His teachers had noticed during parent conferences, their voices careful and encouraging. "Mrs. Carter, Isaiah is exceptional. He can recall entire pages of text after reading them once. He solves complex mathematical problems by remembering similar patterns he has encountered before. This is an extremely rare gift." But what good was a rare gift in a school with broken computers, outdated textbooks, and teachers stretched so thin they could barely cover the basic curriculum? What good was brilliance when you were being taught daily that your kind did not belong in spaces that mattered? Still, Isaiah's mind absorbed everything. He noticed things adults overlooked. The way Marcus's left hand trembled slightly when he drank his morning coffee. The pattern in the security guard rotation. The fact that Marcus always took the same walking path through his estate at exactly 6:30 in the evening. The small chip in the marble floor near the study entrance. The way light filtered through the stained glass window at the top of the grand staircase, creating specific patterns at specific times of day. At 8:37 one evening, they heard the sound of an expensive car pulling up the circular driveway. Through the window, Isaiah saw Marcus's driver helping the billionaire out of a black luxury sedan. Marcus was stumbling, laughing too loudly. His expensive suit rumpled and his tie loosened. The charity gala had clearly involved an open bar and generous pause. "Quickly, baby," Diana whispered urgently, gathering her cleaning supplies. "We need to stay out of his path when he is like this." They moved to an adjacent sitting room, Diana continuing to dust, while Isaiah sat quietly on the floor near the doorway, his back against the wall. They could hear Marcus stumbling through the foyer, his voice booming as he dismissed his driver with slurred words. "Wonderful evening. Absolutely wonderful. They gave me an award. Community leadership. Ha! If they only knew the truth." His footsteps grew louder, unsteady on the marble. Isaiah watched through the partially open door as Marcus made his way toward his private study, pulling off his tie, his words running together. "My fortress. My beautiful fortress. Need to check on my treasure. Make sure it's all still there." Marcus disappeared into his study. Isaiah could see a narrow slice of the room through the gap in the doorway. His mother was in the sitting room behind him, focused on her work, trying to finish so they could finally leave after a 14-hour day. But Isaiah watched with the intense focus that characterized him, and what he witnessed in the next few minutes would alter everything. He watched Marcus approach the massive vault, watched him laugh and spin the dials while performing for an audience of none, watched the precise movements with the full attention of his extraordinary memory. Left 4 times, right 3 times, left twice, right once. Watched the vault open, watched Marcus peer inside at his treasures like a dragon admiring its hoard, watched him close it again, fumbling slightly with the dial. And Isaiah's photographic memory captured every detail, every rotation, every number the dial passed over, stored it perfectly, permanently, like a photograph developed in solution and fixed forever. Marcus stumbled to his leather couch and collapsed heavily, passing out within seconds, his expensive shoes still on his feet, one arm dangling to the floor. "Isaiah, come on, baby. We are done," Diana whispered from behind him, wrapping the cord around the vacuum cleaner. Isaiah stood slowly, shouldering his backpack. He said nothing about what he had witnessed. He had learned to be silent, to be invisible, to keep his observations locked away where they could not get him in trouble. They left through the service entrance as the mansion's lights dimmed automatically on their timers, driving home through dark streets in their old sedan. In the car, Diana asked if he was okay, her eyes on the road, her hands gripping the steering wheel that had a crack running through it. Malachi looked out the window at the passing streetlights, the combination still vivid in his mind, sharp and clear. "I am okay, Mama," he said quietly. But he was not okay. None of this was okay. The way Marcus treated them, the casual cruelty, the daily lessons in invisibility and worthlessness, none of it was remotely okay. Marcus Thornhill had never felt more invincible than he did that night stumbling through his mansion. The charity gala had been a complete triumph, a validation of everything he believed about himself. 500 of the city's elite had gathered at the Grand Regency Hotel, and Marcus had been the guest of honor, the centerpiece of the evening celebrations. They had given him an award for philanthropic leadership, a crystal trophy that now sat in the back seat of his car like a small monument to his public image. He had delivered a speech about giving back to the community, about responsibility and compassion, about using wealth to create positive change. The applause had been thunderous and sustained. It was all performance, naturally. Marcus donated to charities exclusively for the tax deductions and the networking opportunities with other wealthy individuals. But standing on that stage, bathed in spotlight and admiration, he had felt like royalty. 6 glasses of wine, 3 glasses of champagne, and 4 whiskies had only amplified the sensation of triumph. Now, at 10:15 in the evening, alone in his study with the door partially ajar, Marcus poured himself another generous pour from the crystal decanter on his desk. His jacket was draped over his chair, his tie loosened and thrown aside, his shirt untucked. The mansion was quiet around him, most of the staff long gone. Only Diana remained, finishing her evening duties in other parts of the house before heading home. Marcus raised his glass to his reflection in the darkened window, his image ghostly against the night. "To me," he said with a laugh that echoed off the walls, "community leader, philanthropist, genius." That last word made him think of his vault, his beautiful, impenetrable fortress standing against the far wall. His greatest achievement. In his intoxicated euphoria, he felt a sudden urge to admire it up close, to commune with his masterpiece. "Nobody can crack this," he said to himself, walking unsteadily toward the massive titanium structure, one hand trailing along his desk for balance. "Nobody even knows how it works anymore. Not the manufacturers, not the experts, not anyone. Just me. Only me." He ran his hand along the cool metal surface, feeling the precision of its construction beneath his palm. The Fortress Elite. Resistance Classification 8. $350,000 of pure security. In the hallway outside, Isaiah moved silently. He had been dusting the picture frames along the corridor, working his way methodically toward the main staircase where his mother was vacuuming the carpet runner. The study door was open just enough for him to see inside, and he froze when he heard Marcus's voice talking to himself. "Stay invisible," his mother had taught him repeatedly. "Do not let him see you, especially when he has been drinking." Isaiah pressed himself against the wall, dust cloth still gripped in his small hand. Through the gap in the doorway, he could see Marcus standing before the vault, swaying slightly on his feet. "You know what?" Marcus said, addressing the vault, as if it were a person capable of listening. "You deserve a performance, a demonstration of genius, my genius." He giggled, a sound that seemed wrong coming from a man his size and age, his social position. Then he stepped up to the dial, his fingers hovering over the metal wheel with theatrical flourish. The perfect pattern, the only pattern, my pattern. Isaiah watched, barely breathing, his body pressed against the wall. His photographic memory engaged automatically, the way it always did when something captured his attention with sufficient intensity. His mind became a camera, recording every detail with perfect clarity and permanent retention. Marcus gripped the dial and began to turn it, narrating to himself like a drunk director explaining a film. "Left," he said, his voice thick with alcohol. 4 complete rotations. Pass all the numbers, around and around and around and around, then stop at 38. See? 38. That is the year my father died, the year I inherited everything and became who I am. The dial clicked softly as it settled on the number. Isaiah's eyes tracked every movement with laser focus. Left 4 times, stop at 38. His mind recorded it like a photograph, sharp and permanent, incapable of fading. "Now right," Marcus continued, his words slurring together slightly. 3 complete rotations, around 3 times, stop at 52. That is my lucky number. Won my first major poker game with a pair of 5s and a 2, made $20,000 that night. Knew then I was destined for greatness. Right 3 times. Stop at 52, then left again, Marcus said with dramatic flair, spinning the dial. Just twice this time. 2 rotations. Stop at 17. That is the day I started my company. May 17th. Best decision of my life. Changed everything. Left 2 times. Stop at 17. And finally, he said, his voice rising with satisfaction, right to 71. Straight there. 71. The number of millions I made on my first major deal. Beautiful, is it not? A combination that tells my story. That is who I am in numbers, right to 71. There was a soft, mechanical click, deeper than the others, more final. Marcus grabbed the handle and pulled with both hands. The massive door swung open smoothly, perfectly balanced on its hinges, revealing the vault's interior. Even from his position in the hallway, Isaiah could see stacks of papers, bundles of currency in different colors, leather folders bulging with contents. "My treasure," Marcus said, his voice full of possessive satisfaction. "All mine. Protected. Safe. Untouchable. Nobody can reach this. Nobody even knows it exists in its full glory." He stood there for a long moment, admiring his hoard like a mythical dragon, surveying its gold, his eyes scanning the contents with obvious pleasure. Then he laughed again and began to close the door, his movements less steady than before. "Now we lock it back up," he said, spinning the dial in the opposite direction. "Reverse the sequence. Add the final spin. That is the secret. You have to know both patterns, opening and closing, different but related. Brilliant, really I am brilliant." Isaiah watched Marcus perform the locking sequence, his mind recording the reverse movements with the same precision. The sequence was now burned into his memory like a brand, like a tattoo on his brain. Every number, every rotation, every detail, permanently stored in perfect resolution. Marcus stepped back from the vault, stumbled badly, and nearly fell forward. He caught himself on the edge of his desk, knocking over a pen holder in the process. Pens scattered across the polished wood surface, and several clattered to the floor with small clicking sounds. "Whoops," he said, laughing at himself without concern. He made no move to pick them up, his coordination too compromised. Instead, he turned toward the leather couch against the wall, suddenly looking exhausted, the alcohol and the evening catching up with him all at once. He collapsed onto it face first, one arm dangling to the floor, his expensive shoes still on his feet. Within seconds, his breathing deepened into the heavy rhythm of unconscious sleep, small snoring sounds emerging from his open mouth. Isaiah remained frozen in the hallway, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He had just witnessed something he was not supposed to see, something Marcus would never have shown anyone while sober. The combination to the impenetrable vault, the secret of the fortress, and Isaiah knew it now. Knew it completely, stored in the permanent archive of his photographic memory, left 4 times to 38, right 3 times to 52, left twice to 17, right to 71. The pattern was etched into his mind with perfect clarity, as permanent as his own name, as unchangeable as his date of birth. He heard his mother's footsteps on the stairs, the vacuum cleaner going silent mid-pull. Quickly, quietly, Isaiah continued dusting the frames, moving away from the study door, putting distance between himself and the scene he had witnessed. By the time Diana appeared at the top of the staircase, he was several feet down the hallway, working as if nothing unusual had happened, as if his world had not just shifted. "Almost done, baby?" Diana asked softly, wrapping the vacuum cord around its hooks. "Yes, Mama. Almost done." They finished their work in silence, gathering supplies, checking that everything was in proper order, that they had completed every task on the extensive list. Through the open study door, they could hear Marcus snoring on his couch, dead to the world. Diana glanced in, her face expressionless, carefully neutral, then guided Isaiah toward the service staircase that staff used exclusively. They left through the kitchen entrance, the cool night air a relief after the mansion's controlled atmosphere. Diana's sedan sat alone in the staff parking area, looking shabby and worn under the harsh security lights. She unlocked it with a key that stuck in the door, a problem she could not afford to fix, one of many small mechanical failures she was nursing along. As they pulled out through the service gate, Isaiah pressed his face against the window, looking back at the mansion. All those rooms, all that space, all that wealth contained behind those walls and gates, and inside, a man passed out drunk on a couch, protected by technology and paranoia, and a vault that he thought made him invincible. "You okay, baby?" Diana asked, her eyes on the road ahead, her hands gripping the steering wheel with its crack. Malachi turned away from the window. His mother looked exhausted, her shoulders slumped, her entire body radiating fatigue. She had worked 14 hours today, just like yesterday, just like tomorrow would be, cleaning up after a man who treated her like she was invisible at best, vermin at worst. "I am okay, Mama," he said quietly. But he was not okay. He had a secret now, information that Marcus would never want anyone to possess, the combination to his fortress, the key to his treasure. And Isaiah did not know what to do with it, whether it mattered, whether he should tell anyone. So he said nothing. He looked out the window as they drove through streets that grew progressively dimmer, buildings that grew progressively smaller and more run down. Away from the estates and gated communities, through middle-class neighborhoods that were clean and maintained, into the area where rent was affordable and dreams were practical rather than aspirational. 26 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of their apartment complex. The building was old, but maintained, as well as the landlord's limited budget allowed, with peeling paint on the exterior and a lobby door that did not always lock properly. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor, a 1-bedroom unit with a leaky bathroom faucet that the landlord kept promising to fix, but never did. Diana Parallel parked between a pickup truck missing its front bumper and a sedan with duct tape holding the passenger window in place. She turned off the engine, and for a moment they sat in silence, neither moving. Through the windshield, they could see laundry hanging on balconies, the flicker of television screens through thin curtains, the glow of a corner store sign advertising cigarettes and lottery tickets and cheap beer. This was home, small and worn, but home. The contrast to Marcus Thornhill's mansion was stark and painful, almost physically painful to contemplate. 14 acres versus 800 square feet, crystal chandeliers versus a ceiling fan that rattled, a custom vault holding $200 million versus a checking account that barely covered groceries and rent, with nothing left over. "Come on," Diana said softly, gathering her purse. "School tomorrow, even if it is break. You have reading to do for your class." They climbed the stairs together, Isaiah's backpack bouncing against his shoulders, his feet heavy with exhaustion. Inside their apartment, Diana made them sandwiches for a late dinner, while Isaiah sat at their small kitchen table, his library book open in front of him, the pages illuminated by the overhead light that buzzed slightly. But he could not focus on the words in front of him. His mind kept returning to that study, to Marcus stumbling before the vault, to the sequence of numbers and rotations now permanently etched in his memory with perfect clarity. Left 4 times to 38, right 3 times to 52, left twice to 17, right to 71. He did not know why it mattered, why his brain had captured it with such intensity. Didn't know that in 6 days this secret would become the most important thing in his life. Didn't know that the drunken performance he had witnessed would set in motion events that would change absolutely everything for him, for his mother, for Marcus Thornhill, for dozens of other people whose lives had intersected with the billionaire's contempt. For now, he was just an 8-year-old boy eating a sandwich in a small apartment, his mother sitting across from him with her own sandwich, both of them too tired to talk much, carrying a secret he did not ask for, did not want, did not understand the significance of yet, trying to be invisible in a world that had already decided he did not matter, that his kind did not belong in important spaces. Marcus Thornhill woke to the sound of his phone screaming on the nightstand, an alarm he did not remember setting. Sunlight stabbed through the gaps in his bedroom curtains like knives designed specifically to torture hungover billionaires. His head felt like it was literally splitting open, his mouth tasted like something had crawled inside and died there, and his entire body ached from sleeping in his clothes on the study couch instead of his custom mattress. He grabbed the phone without looking at the screen, without checking who was calling. "What?" he barked into it. "Mr. Thornhill, where are you?" His assistant's voice was sharp with barely controlled panic. "The merger team from California has been waiting in the conference room for 25 minutes. They flew in specifically for this meeting. You scheduled it yourself 3 weeks ago. They need the Henderson files, the offshore account documentation, everything you said you would have ready for them." Marcus sat up too quickly. The room tilted dangerously. "What time is it?" 9:40. The meeting was scheduled for 9 sharp. "Sir, these people are not happy. Mr. Henderson himself is here, and he is talking about walking away from the deal entirely. The Henderson merger. 6 months of delicate negotiations. A $400 million deal that would expand his company into 3 new markets and cement his dominance in the industry. The documentation was critical, time-sensitive, legally required for today's signing ceremony. And it was all locked in the vault, every single page. "Tell them I will be there in an hour," Marcus said, his voice hoarse and rough. "Something came up, a security issue. I need to handle it first." "Sir, they are already talking about leaving. Mr. Henderson said if we are not professional enough to honor our commitments, he has better options. He mentioned your competitors specifically." "I said I will handle it," Marcus snapped, then ended the call before his assistant could argue further. He stumbled toward his study, still wearing yesterday's rumpled suit that smelled of alcohol and expensive cologne gone stale. The vault stood against the wall, exactly where it had been last night, solid and impenetrable, mocking him with its silence. Marcus's hands shook slightly as he approached it, the hangover making his head pound with each heartbeat. But underneath the physical pain was something worse, something that made his stomach clench. A creeping sense of wrongness, of disaster approaching. He had opened this vault hundreds of times since its installation. He knew the combination by heart, or he thought he did. He gripped the dial and tried to remember through the fog of alcohol and sleep deprivation. Left first, that much he knew with certainty. But how many rotations? 4? Or was it 3? And what was the first number? 30-something, 38, or 35, or 33? He spun the dial left 4 times, counted carefully, stopped at 38. Then tried right 3 times to 52, left twice to 17, right to 71, pulled the handle. Nothing happened. The vault remained locked, silent, indifferent to his pulling and yanking. Marcus felt a flutter of panic in his chest, his breathing quickening. He tried again, more carefully this time, concentrating despite the pounding in his head. Left 4 times to 38, right 3 times to 52, left twice to 17, right to 71, pulled harder, nothing, no click, no give, no success. No, 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 he muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead with a trembling hand. Maybe he had miscounted the rotations. Maybe it was left 3 times first, then right 4 times. Or was the first number 35 instead of 38? Or was it 43? He tried variation after variation, his panic increasing with each failed attempt. His head pounded with each movement, the numbers blurred together in his mind, refusing to settle into the correct pattern. Was it 52 or 25? Was it 17 or 71? Had he turned left or right first? The mechanical certainty he had felt 8 months ago had evaporated completely. An hour passed, then another. His phone kept ringing with increasing frequency. His assistant, the merger team, Henderson himself, his lawyer calling to ask what was happening. He ignored them all, his entire focus on the dial that refused to cooperate, on the combination that had vanished from his supposedly perfect memory. By noon, Marcus had filled 4 pages with attempted combinations, crossing out each failed sequence with increasingly violent strokes of his pen. None of them worked. The vault remained sealed, his fortune and his critical documents locked inside, completely inaccessible. He called his assistant back, his hand shaking as he held the phone. Cancel everything. All meetings for today, all calls. Tell Henderson we will reschedule as soon as possible. Sir, Henderson is absolutely furious. He is saying the deal is off unless we produce the documentation by end of business today. Our legal team says we are in breach of the preliminary agreement. We could face serious consequences. I said cancel everything, Marcus shouted into the phone, his voice cracking. Then he ended the call and threw the phone across the room, where it hit the wall and clattered to the floor, the screen cracking. He stared at the vault, his breath coming in short gasps, sweat running down his face. This could not be happening. This was impossible. He had designed this vault specifically to be impenetrable to everyone else, and now it was impenetrable to him. His own paranoia had trapped him. His own brilliant design had become his prison. By evening, desperate and exhausted and still slightly drunk from continuing to pour whiskey down his throat, Marcus found the contact information for the Swiss manufacturer. His hands shook as he dialed the international number, barely able to hit the correct digits. Fortress Security Systems, a professional voice answered. How may I direct your call? I need to speak to someone about a custom vault immediately, Marcus said, his voice tight. This is Marcus Thornhill. I purchased a Resistance Classification 8 unit 8 months ago. There was a pause, some clicking of keyboards in the background. One moment, Mr. Thornhill. Marcus was transferred twice before reaching the lead engineer who had overseen his vault's construction, Heinrich with the silver-rimmed glasses. Mr. Thornhill, Heinrich said, his voice professional and precise. Good evening. How can I assist you? I need the backup combination for my vault, Marcus said, or the override code, or whatever failsafe you built into the system. Another pause, longer this time. Sir, You specifically requested no backup access of any kind whatsoever. You signed extensive documentation waiving all manufacturer support for lock recovery. We honored that request explicitly. We destroyed all records per your specific written instructions. What? Marcus's voice rose to nearly a shout. You are telling me there is no way to open this vault? Not without the combination you created, no, sir. Heinrich replied calmly. That was the entire point of your custom specifications. You wanted a vault that even we could not access under any circumstances. We built exactly what you requested. We have the signed contracts confirming your specifications. But what if I forget the combination? Then the safe remains locked indefinitely, Heinrich said simply. We did discuss this possibility extensively during the design phase. Multiple times, in fact. You assured us repeatedly that you would never forget. You said your memory was perfect. Marcus wanted to scream, to reach through the phone and strangle this man with his precise Swiss accent and his calm professional tone. What about drilling through it? Cutting it open? Possible in theory, Heinrich replied, but extraordinarily difficult and time-consuming. The vault is Resistance Classification 8. The highest civilian rating. It would take many weeks, possibly months, and there is a high probability of damaging the contents. The heat from cutting could destroy paper documents, melt electronic storage devices. We can recommend specialists who might attempt it if you wish. Send me their information immediately, Marcus said, then ended the call and threw his phone again, this time against the wall, hard enough that it shattered completely. Pieces of glass and metal scattering across the floor. He poured himself another whiskey with shaking hands, the liquid sloshing over the rim of the glass. This was supposed to be impossible. He was supposed to be protected, secure, invincible. Instead, he was trapped by his own creation, locked out of his own fortress. Day 2 began with Marcus hiring the first team of safe specialists recommended by Heinrich through an email that arrived at dawn. 3 men arrived at 7 in the morning with equipment cases and professional confidence that Marcus found reassuring. They examined the vault for 3 hours, running acoustic sensors along its surface, using electromagnetic scanning devices, consulting thick technical manuals that contained diagrams and specifications. The lead specialist, a grey-haired man named Robert with scarred hands and 30 years of experience, finally straightened up and removed his glasses, wiping them carefully. Mr. Thornhill, this is extraordinary craftsmanship, he said, his tone almost admiring. The locking mechanism is purely mechanical, with no electronics to bypass. The titanium alloy is military grade, designed to resist drilling and cutting. Without the combination or the original blueprints which you had destroyed, we are looking at many months of work trying to crack this. And that is assuming we get lucky. What about cutting through it? Marcus asked. The same question he had asked Heinrich. Possible, Robert replied slowly, but it would take many weeks and require specialized equipment we would need to order. Diamond-tipped drills, plasma cutters that cost tens of thousands to operate. And even then, there is no guarantee we would not damage whatever is inside. The heat from cutting could easily destroy paper documents, melt plastic, damage electronic components. Marcus felt his chest tighten, his breathing becoming shallow. I need what is inside intact. It is critical business documentation that cannot be replaced. Robert nodded sympathetically, his expression understanding. Then I strongly suggest you keep trying to remember the combination, sir. That is genuinely your best option by far. Mechanical locks like this are designed specifically to resist every other method. They worked for 9 more hours, trying everything they knew. Acoustic methods to listen for the tumblers engaging, pressure sensors to detect microscopic movements, mathematical probability models to narrow down potential combinations. Nothing worked. The vault remained sealed, untouched, unchanged. By evening, they packed up their equipment and left, unable to help, apologizing for their failure. Marcus stood alone in his study, watching them drive away through the window, feeling his empire beginning to crack. Day 3 brought a second team, recommended by a business associate who swore they were the best on the East Coast. These specialists were younger, more aggressive in their methods, more confident in their technology. They set up laptops running sophisticated cracking algorithms, positioned ultra-sensitive microphones against the vault's door, tried manipulation techniques that involved feeling for microscopic movements in the dial mechanism. Marcus watched from his desk, drinking steadily throughout the day. Whiskey in the morning to steady his nerves, whiskey in the afternoon to numb the panic, whiskey in the evening to help him sleep. The alcohol did not help him remember the combination. It only made the panic worse, made his thoughts more scattered, made the numbers slip further from his grasp. His phone kept ringing with increasingly urgent messages, despite his instructions to cancel everything. The Henderson deal had collapsed completely, with Henderson's lawyers now threatening to sue for breach of contract. $400 million gone, vanished, because Marcus could not produce documentation. His CFO needed offshore account information for a tax audit that was scheduled for next week. His board of directors wanted answers about his mysterious absence from critical meetings and his failure to respond to urgent communications. And still the vault remained locked, impenetrable, mocking him. Day 4 brought a third team with even more equipment, more sophisticated scanning devices, more complex mathematical approaches, more failed attempts. Marcus stopped watching their efforts. He sat at his desk with his head in his hands, surrounded by pages of attempted combinations, empty glasses, and mounting desperation that felt like drowning. Day 5 brought a fourth team, specialists from 3 states away who had cracked supposedly impossible vaults before. They brought equipment Marcus did not recognize, tried methods he did not understand, made confident proclamations that proved empty. None of it mattered. The vault was designed to be impenetrable, and it was living up to its design with perfect efficiency. By the evening of Day 5, Marcus's study looked like a disaster zone, a war room that had lost its war. Equipment cases stacked in corners gathering dust, cables running across the floor like mechanical snakes, laptops displaying failure messages on their screens, tools scattered everywhere, abandoned when they proved useless. And in the center of it all, the vault stood untouched, unmoved, uncracked, a monument to his own paranoia. Marcus was on his 7th whiskey of the day when the 5th team arrived late in the afternoon. These were supposedly the absolute best, the most experienced safecrackers on the entire eastern seaboard. If anyone could help him, he had been told, it was this team. Among them was Eleanor Morrison, a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and a reputation for cracking the impossible, for solving problems that defeated everyone else. She examined the vault with professional detachment, running her fingers along the dial, pressing her ear against the cold door, checking the hinges and the frame with practiced movements. "How long have you been locked out?" she asked without looking at him. 5 days, Marcus said, his voice rough with exhaustion and alcohol. "And you are certain you do not remember any part of the combination?" "Pieces," Marcus replied. "I remember pieces, numbers that might be correct, but not the sequence, not the exact rotations. Every time I think I have it figured out, nothing works. Every attempt fails." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully, her expression neutral. "The problem with mechanical locks like this is there is no backdoor, no electronic signature to trace or manipulate. It is pure engineering, beautiful mechanical precision, and completely impossible to bypass without the combination or many months of dedicated work." "I do not have months," Marcus said, his voice cracking with desperation. "I have business deals collapsing, federal audits approaching, legal documents trapped in there that I need immediately. My entire company is suffering because I cannot access my own property." "Then you need to remember," Eleanor said simply, her tone matter of fact. because any other option will take longer than you have. She set up her equipment and began to work with focused intensity, her team supporting her efforts with precision and coordination. Day 6 arrived with Marcus having barely slept in nearly a week. His business empire was hemorrhaging money and reputation. Phone calls from angry partners, concerned board members, threatening lawyers filled his voicemail. His absence from critical meetings was raising serious questions. His inability to produce essential documents was causing real, measurable damage to his company's operations and relationships. And still, despite 5 teams of experts and tens of thousands of dollars spent, nobody could open the vault. By 2 p.m. on day 6, Eleanor Morrison had been working for 3 days straight with minimal breaks. She had tried everything in her considerable arsenal, every technique she had learned in 20 years of cracking supposedly impossible vaults. Nothing had worked. The Fortress Elite lived up to its name and its reputation. She was taking a break, consulting with her team members in low voices, when Marcus poured himself another whiskey and felt something inside him finally break completely. His desperation had transformed into rage, pure and burning. Rage at the vault for defeating him, rage at himself for forgetting, rage at his own paranoid brilliance that had created this prison. He stood up, swaying slightly on his feet, and raised his glass toward the vault, toward the specialists who had failed, toward the universe that was mocking him. "If anyone can crack this vault," he shouted, his voice thick with alcohol and fury, $200 million is theirs. Take it, I do not care anymore. Just open the damn thing. The room went completely silent. Tools stopped moving mid-action. Conversations ceased mid-sentence. Every head in the room turned toward him with expressions of shock and disbelief. One of the technicians, a young man named Christopher, spoke up uncertainly. "Sir, are you serious about that offer?" Marcus, beyond caring about consequences, beyond rational thought, waved his glass dismissively, whiskey sloshing over the rim. "Yes, $200 million cash. I do not care who does it. I do not care how they do it. Just open my vault, right now." The words hung in the air, witnessed by 14 professionals who would remember exactly what was said, who were already mentally recording this moment. And in the corner of the room, sitting so quietly that nobody had noticed him for hours, was a small figure in a faded superhero t-shirt. Isaiah Carter had been there all day, sitting cross-legged on the floor near a bookshelf, his worn backpack beside him, completely invisible to the adults consumed by their failing efforts. School was still on break, his mother was still bringing him to work, and Isaiah had discovered that if he sat very still and very quiet, adults forgot he existed entirely. He had been watching the experts all day with fascination, observing their equipment and methods with his characteristic intense focus. He had seen them try acoustic sensors that listened for tumbler movements, electromagnetic scanners that searched for internal mechanisms, mathematical algorithms that calculated probability. He had watched them fail again and again, unable to crack what they could not understand, could not see, could not predict. But Isaiah understood. In his mind, clear as a high-definition photograph, was the sequence he had witnessed 6 nights ago. Left 4 complete rotations to 38, right 3 complete rotations to 52, left 2 rotations to 17, right to 71. He had replayed it in his mind hundreds of times since that night, the way his photographic memory replayed everything, perfect and permanent and unchanging. For 6 days, he had stayed completely silent about what he knew, about what he possessed, because that was what he had been taught his entire life. Stay quiet. Stay invisible. Do not speak unless spoken to directly. Never volunteer information. Marcus had made it abundantly clear, in 100 cruel and casual ways, that Isaiah did not belong in conversations with real people, with people who mattered, that his kind did not have anything valuable to contribute to important situations. But now, hearing the offer, Hearing $200 million offered to anyone, something stirred deep inside him. Isaiah did not fully understand how much money that was, could not really comprehend the magnitude. He knew it was more than his mother made in a lifetime of cleaning, more than their apartment complex probably cost, more than he could really imagine or conceptualize, but more than the money. Something else pulled at him with almost physical force. The knowledge that he could help, that he possessed something these experts with their expensive equipment and prestigious reputations did not have. The solution they had been seeking desperately for 6 days. The answer that could unlock everything. In the adjacent sitting room, he could hear his mother vacuuming, the sound steady and familiar, the soundtrack of his childhood. Diana had checked on him 3 times in the past hour, making sure he was staying out of the way, staying invisible like she had taught him, not causing any problems. But what if invisible was not enough anymore? What if sometimes you had to be seen, had to step forward, had to take a risk? Malachi's heart pounded so hard, he thought everyone in the room must be able to hear it echoing off the walls. His palms were sweaty, his mouth dry. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to stay quiet, to not draw Marcus's attention, to remain safely unnoticed in his corner where nothing bad could happen to him. He remembered every cruel comment, every racial slur disguised as a joke, every look that communicated he was less than human, worth less than the furniture. But he also remembered his mother's tired face every evening, her slumped shoulders after 14-hour days of scrubbing and cleaning. The way she flinched when Marcus raised his voice or appeared suddenly, the apartment with the leaky faucet and the rattling ceiling fan, and the bills that were always somehow just barely paid with nothing left over for anything extra. $200 million could change that completely. Could change everything, could give his mother a life where she did not have to clean up after people who treated her like trash. Isaiah's hands gripped the straps of his backpack so tightly, his knuckles turned pale. His throat felt tight, constricted. He watched the technicians working, watched Marcus drinking, watched the vault sitting there like a monument to 6 days of failure. He knew with absolute certainty he could open it, knew it the way he knew his own name. The combination was burned into his brain, permanent and precise, incapable of fading. He could walk over there right now and have it open in 60 seconds, maybe less. But should he? The internal struggle played out in his 8-year-old mind with all the weight of a life-changing decision. Fear versus courage. Safety versus opportunity. The learned behavior of invisibility versus the possibility of being truly seen, acknowledged, valued for what he could do rather than dismissed for what he looked like. Marcus had said anyone. The word echoed in Isaiah's memory, repeating. He did not say any adult, he did not say any professional, he did not say any qualified expert. He said anyone who can crack it. And Isaiah was anyone. He was someone. He could do this. Slowly, his entire body trembling with fear and determination, Isaiah stood up from his corner. The movement was small, almost imperceptible in the busy room full of activity. Nobody noticed at first. The experts were too focused on their equipment, their calculations, their failing attempts that were costing them professional pride. Isaiah took a small step forward, away from the safety of his corner where he had been invisible. Then another step. His heart hammered so violently he thought it might burst through his chest. His mouth was completely dry. Every muscle in his body wanted to run, to sit back down, to disappear back into invisibility where it was safe and familiar. But he kept moving forward, one small, trembling step at a time, toward the vault and the man who had spent years teaching him through casual cruelty that he did not matter, that his kind would never amount to anything. Toward the moment that would change absolutely everything. "Excuse me, Mr. Thornhill," Isaiah's small voice cut through the mechanical hum of equipment and low conversations like a knife through fabric. "May I attempt it?" Time seemed to freeze completely. Eleanor Morrison's hand stopped mid-adjustment on her acoustic sensor. Christopher looked up from his laptop, his fingers hovering motionless over the keyboard. The other technicians turned from their work, tools suspended in mid-air, conversations dying mid-word. Even the ambient noise seemed to pause, as if the mansion itself was holding its breath. Every head in the room pivoted toward the corner where the voice had originated, expressions ranging from shock to confusion. Isaiah stood there in the middle of the room now, small and visibly trembling, his faded superhero t-shirt bright against the room's muted, expensive tones. His yellow jacket was tied around his waist, his worn backpack still hung from one shoulder. He looked impossibly young, impossibly out of place among the professional equipment and exhausted experts who had been failing for 6 days straight. Marcus stared at him, his whiskey glass frozen halfway to his lips. For several long seconds, his alcohol-fogged brain struggled to process what he was seeing, what he was hearing. Then recognition slowly dawned, and his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something much darker, much uglier. He laughed, a cruel, loud sound that echoed off the expensive walls and made Isaiah flinch. "The helps kid wants to play with my vault." Marcus set down his glass heavily and turned to the technicians, his voice dripping with vicious mockery. "Did you all hear that? This is what we've come to? What comes next? Should we let him count my money too? Maybe let him play with my business documents?" Several technicians shifted uncomfortably in place, avoiding eye contact. Christopher looked away toward the window, but Marcus was just getting started, the alcohol and stress and 6 days of failure stripping away whatever thin veneer of civility he usually maintained in front of others. "Look at him," Marcus continued, gesturing at Isaiah with his glass, whiskey sloshing, standing there in his little cartoon shirt like he is at a playground. "This is a multi-million-dollar security system, boy, not a toy. Not something for kids who probably cannot even spell combination properly." Isaiah flinched visibly, but did not move, did not run. His hands gripped the straps of his backpack tighter, his knuckles white. Marcus's mockery escalated, his words growing sharper, more openly vicious. "Maybe we should check if anything is missing from my house first. You know these people and their sticky fingers, probably been plotting this for days with his mother. That is how they operate. Always looking for an angle, always trying to take what is not theirs." The technicians exchanged deeply uncomfortable glances now. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from professional failure to something much worse, something that made people want to leave. Eleanor Morrison's jaw tightened visibly, her hands curling into fists at her sides, but she stayed silent for the moment, watching this unfold. "I mean, seriously," Marcus continued, his voice loud and slurred, "this is what happens when you let the help bring their kids to work. They start getting ideas above their station, start thinking they belong in places they do not, start touching things that are not meant for them, start imagining they have value." From the adjacent room, Diana heard her son's name spoken in that tone and abandoned her vacuum cleaner immediately. She rushed to the doorway, her face already crumpling when she saw Isaiah standing in the center of the room, with all eyes on him, with Marcus looking at him like that. Tears started streaming down her face instantly. "Isaiah, baby, come with Mama," she said, her voice breaking completely. "Do not listen to him. Come on now, please." But Isaiah pulled his hand back gently when she reached for him. He looked up at his mother with eyes that were terrified but determined, showing a courage she had never seen in him before. Then he turned back to Marcus, his small voice quiet but steady despite his fear. "You said anyone, Mr. Thornhill. You said $200 million to anyone who can crack it." "I heard you say it. Everyone heard you say it." Marcus's face twisted with contempt and rage. "Anyone? You think I meant you? You think I meant some welfare kid whose mother scrubs my toilets for minimum wage? Let me guess, your father is not around to teach you how the world actually works. Is he Typical for your kind. No father, no sense, no understanding of your place in society." Diana sobbed quietly, her hand over her mouth, her entire body shaking. Isaiah's eyes filled with tears that he tried desperately to hold back. But he did not move from where he stood, did not run to his mother, did not flee the room. Eleanor Morrison had heard enough. She stepped forward decisively, her voice cutting through Marcus's tirade like steel. "Mr. Thornhill, you made a public offer. We all witnessed it clearly. You signed a document." She gestured sharply to the paper still sitting on his desk, the one he had scrawled his promise on. "Your exact words were, if anyone can crack this vault, $200 million is theirs." Those words were witnessed by 14 people in this room. We all heard you say it. Marcus whirled on her, his face flushed with alcohol and fury. "I meant actual people," he started to say, then caught himself before completing the thought. But everyone in the room knew exactly what word was on the tip of his tongue, what he was thinking. Not this kid. Not some ignorant child who probably does not even understand what $200 million means. Sasha's voice remained coldly professional, but her disgust was absolutely evident. "You did not specify qualifications, Mr. Thornhill. You did not say any professional or any adult or any qualified expert. Your exact words, which I remember perfectly, were anyone, and your signed document does not include any exclusions or limitations. Those 14 witnesses can testify to exactly what was said and what was written." The other technicians nodded slowly, some of them pulling out their phones. Christopher held up his phone with the screen facing Marcus. "I recorded the audio of your offer, sir," he said quietly. "For documentation purposes, it is very clear and unambiguous." Marcus was trapped, cornered by his own desperate words, his own signed document. His ego, already bruised and battered by 6 days of failure, could not handle the humiliation of admitting he had been careless, that he had not thought through his words before speaking them. And in front of these professionals whose respect he craved, whose validation he needed, he could not back down, without looking even weaker than he already felt. He waved his glass dismissively, whiskey sloshing over the rim onto his expensive carpet. "Fine. Let the little brat try then. When he fails spectacularly, maybe he will finally learn his place in the world. Maybe his mother will finally teach him that some things are not meant for people like them." He turned to Diana, his voice absolutely vicious. "This is your fault. Filling his head with impossible ideas. Making him think he can touch my property, be in my space. When this is over, and he has failed and embarrassed himself, we are going to have a very serious conversation about boundaries and about your continued employment here." Diana was crying openly now, her whole body shaking with fear and humiliation and helplessness. But Isaiah stepped away from her, his small legs moving toward the vault on trembling limbs. The technicians parted like water, creating a clear path for him. Some looked at him with obvious pity, others with curiosity. Eleanor Morrison watched with an expression that was complex and hard to read. Isaiah approached the massive vault, and suddenly the scale of it became brutally obvious to everyone watching. The vault was nearly 6 feet tall, an imposing monolith of titanium. The dial was positioned at chest height for an adult. For an 8-year-old boy, it was positioned higher than his head. He stood on his tiptoes, stretching to reach the dial, his fingers barely able to grasp it properly. Behind him, his mother watched with her hands pressed to her mouth, her tears falling silently, unable to stop them. Marcus leaned against his desk with his arms crossed, smirking with anticipation, waiting for the inevitable failure that would teach this child a lesson about knowing his place. Isaiah closed his eyes, blocking out the room, the people, the pressure. In his mind, he traveled back to that night 6 days ago, saw Marcus stumbling into the study, laughing, drunk on champagne and whiskey and his own sense of invincibility. Saw him approach the vault with that same arrogant confidence, saw his hands on the dial, heard his voice narrating the movements like a director explaining a scene, left 4 complete rotations to 38, right 3 complete rotations to 52, left 2 rotations to 17, right to 71. The memory was perfect, crystalline, as vivid and clear as if it were happening right now in front of him. His photographic memory did not fade or blur or degrade. It captured and held information like a digital photograph that never aged, never lost resolution. Isaiah opened his eyes and reached for the dial with both small hands. The room held its collective breath, 14 people frozen in anticipation. His small hands began to move with careful precision, left, spinning the dial carefully, counting in his head. 4 complete times around, the metal wheel smooth and cold under his fingers. 1 rotation, 2, 3, 4, stop exactly at 38. Marcus's smirk faltered slightly, almost imperceptibly. The number 38 meant something to him, triggered some faint recognition. But no, it had to be just coincidence. The kid was guessing randomly. Right, 2 complete rotations, no wait 3. Isaiah's tongue peeked out slightly in concentration, the way children do when intensely focused on a difficult task. 1 rotation, 2, 3. Stop precisely at 52. The room was absolutely silent now, no equipment humming, no one moving or speaking. Just the sound of the dial turning, and everyone's held breath creating tension. Left. 2 rotations this time. Isaiah turned it carefully, his small hand steady despite his racing heart. 1, 2. Stop at 17. Eleanor Morrison leaned forward slightly, her professional interest peaked intensely. Those were extremely specific numbers, not random attempts or common combinations. The child was following a definite pattern, a specific sequence. Right. The final movement. Isaiah turned the dial 1 more time, slower now, more carefully, stopped it exactly at 71. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Marcus's smirk started to return to his face, relief and vindication mixing. "See?" he started to say. "Just a stupid kid making random guesses. This will teach him to—" Click. The sound was soft but unmistakable, like a whisper of mechanical perfection. The internal mechanism engaging, the lock releasing after 6 days of resistance. Isaiah grabbed the handle with both of his small hands and pulled with all his strength. The massive steel door, weighing hundreds of pounds, swung open smoothly on its perfectly calibrated and lubricated hinges. Inside, visible to everyone in the stunned room, were stacks of bearer bonds, bundles of cash in multiple currencies, creating a rainbow of colors, leather folders bulging with documents and secrets. Marcus's treasure. His fortune, his secrets, all revealed by an 8-year-old black boy in a faded superhero t-shirt. Elapsed time from touching the dial to opening the door. 58 seconds. The silence that followed was absolute, total, complete, as if the world itself had stopped rotating on its axis. Then chaos erupted like a bomb detonating. "Oh my God," Christopher whispered, his laptop completely forgotten. "That is impossible. That should not be possible." "Absolutely impossible," another technician breathed, his voice barely audible. Eleanor Morrison started laughing, a sound of pure amazement and professional vindication. He did it. The kid actually did it in under a minute, what we could not do in 6 days. Marcus's whiskey glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor, the sound like a gunshot in the stunned silence. Crystal fragments scattered across the white stone in glittering patterns, whiskey spreading in a dark stain that looked almost like blood. His face cycled through emotions too quickly to track properly. Shock, disbelief, confusion, recognition, then something much darker, something that had been building for 6 days of failure and humiliation. Pure rage, unfiltered fury. "That is impossible," Marcus shouted, his voice cracking with the strain. "He cheated somehow, that little—" He stopped himself barely, just barely. He planned this. "You coached him," he said, whirling on Diana. "You told him the combination. You have been plotting to steal from me this whole time. This is theft. This is conspiracy." Diana, still crying, shook her head frantically, desperately. "Mr. Thornhill, I swear on everything, I do not know the combination. I have never known it. Nobody does. Nobody except you." "Liar!" Marcus shouted, lurching forward with his coordination compromised by days of alcohol. He grabbed Isaiah roughly by his shirt, lifting the small boy completely off his feet. Isaiah cried out in fear and pain, his feet dangling above the floor, Marcus's grip painfully tight on his shirt collar. "How did you know?" Marcus demanded, shaking him violently. "Did you break into my study? Did you install hidden cameras? Did your mother steal my password? Tell me right now, you little thief. Tell me how you knew." "Mr. Thornhill, let go of my son." Diana tried to intervene, her voice breaking completely, but Marcus shoved her hard with his free hand. She stumbled backward, hitting the wall with a painful thud, her head connecting with the solid surface. "I saw you," Isaiah sobbed, terrified, his small voice barely intelligible through his tears. "That night, when you came home from the party, I was helping Mama clean and you opened it. You were talking to yourself. I just remembered what you did. I just watched and remembered." "Liar!" Marcus shook him even more violently, Isaiah's head snapping back and forth like a rag doll. "Nobody has that kind of memory, especially not some ignorant kid from the projects. You are trying to con me. This is theft. You and your mother planned this whole thing. You have been plotting this." Eleanor Morrison moved fast, faster than anyone expected. She physically grabbed Marcus's arm and twisted it hard, using a technique that suggested self-defense training. Her strength was surprising and effective. "Touch that child again, and I am calling the police myself right now," she said, her voice cold as ice. "Put him down immediately." When Marcus did not immediately comply, too drunk and enraged to process her words, she twisted his wrist harder, applying real pressure. The pain cut through his alcohol haze like a knife. He dropped Isaiah with a yelp of pain. Isaiah collapsed to his knees on the hard floor, crying uncontrollably. Diana rushed forward despite her own pain and gathered her son in her arms protectively, checking him frantically for injuries, her whole body shaking with fear and rage and complete helplessness in this situation. "Some children have eidetic memory, Mr. Thornhill," Eleanor said coldly, standing between Marcus and the mother and child, her body language making it absolutely clear she would physically intervene again if necessary. "It is rare, but not impossible. It is well documented in medical literature. And this child just demonstrated it perfectly while you assaulted him." She held up her phone, screen facing Marcus with obvious intent. "I recorded everything that just happened. Your offer, your racial slurs, your physical assault of an 8-year-old child. And I am not the only one." Around the room, other technicians held up their phones, screens glowing. Christopher nodded firmly. "I got it all on video. Crystal clear. The audio is perfect." The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow, like cold water over his head. 14 witnesses, multiple recordings from different angles, his offer captured on audio, his words preserved digitally, his violence documented in high definition. All of it captured, distributed across multiple devices, already uploading to cloud storage beyond his reach. Marcus stood in the center of his study, staring at the open vault with the expression of a man watching his entire world collapse in real time. The realization was sinking in through the alcohol fog and the rage, cutting deeper than any hangover ever could. His fortress was breached. His secrets were exposed. His violence was recorded, and an 8-year-old child had done what 5 teams of experts with sophisticated equipment could not do in 6 days of trying. "I'm not paying," Marcus suddenly roared, his voice raw with fury and desperation and denial. "You actually think I'm going to give $200 million to him? To some welfare kid who probably cannot even count that high? To them? He advanced on Isaiah again, his fists clenched, but Eleanor Morrison stepped between them immediately, her body language making it absolutely clear she would not hesitate to physically intervene again if he tried anything. "Mr. Thornhill, step back right now," she said, her voice steady but hard as steel, unyielding. "This is my house." Marcus was nearly screaming now, spittle flying from his lips. "My safe, my money, my rules. I do not care what I said earlier. I was drunk. I was desperate. You actually think any court in this country would hold me to a promise made to a child? To him?" The words hung in the air, ugly and raw and irreversible. The racism that Marcus had disguised as jokes for years, hidden behind coded language and plausible deniability, was now on full display, recorded and witnessed. His mask had completely shattered along with his whiskey glass. "You people are always looking for handouts," Marcus continued, his face flushed dark red. "Always trying to take what is not yours. Always scheming. This is theft, pure theft." His mother probably coached him for weeks, probably told him the combination somehow. These people are patient like that. They wait for their moment to steal what they have not earned. Christopher, still filming on his phone, spoke up carefully. "Sir, you are making this significantly worse for yourself with every word." "Worse?" Marcus laughed, a sound with absolutely no humor in it. "How could it possibly get worse? My safe is open. My business is falling apart. And now you are all standing here acting like I should pay a child $200 million because of some drunken promise I made under duress. Get out, all of you, get out of my house immediately." The technicians began gathering their equipment quickly, moving efficiently, exchanging glances that communicated silent messages about what they had just witnessed. This was not just about a safe anymore. This was something that would follow them, that they would talk about for years, that would become a story they told. Marcus turned his full fury on Diana, who was still kneeling on the floor with Isaiah in her arms. "You," he said, pointing at her with a shaking finger, "you are fired. Effective immediately. Pack your things and get out. You and your criminal son are done here. Do not expect any references. Do not expect anything." Diana looked up at him, her face streaked with tears, but something new flickered in her eyes now, something that had not been there before. Not quite defiance yet, but no longer just fear, no longer pure submission. "You heard me?" Marcus shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. 10 years of cleaning my house, and this is how you repay me, by teaching your son to rob me, by plotting against me. I want you gone." "Mr. Thornhill," Diana started to say, her voice quiet but steady. "I said I do not want to hear it," he interrupted her viciously. He pointed toward the door, his hand shaking violently. "Get out, and do not expect to find work anywhere in this city when I am done with you. I am going to make sure no one ever hires you again. I am going to tell everyone what you tried to do here, how you and your son conspired to steal from me. You will be lucky if you can get a job cleaning bathrooms at a gas station when I finish destroying your reputation." Diana stood slowly, pulling Isaiah up with her, her movements deliberate. The boy was still crying, his face buried in his mother's side, his small body shaking. She wrapped her arm around him protectively and began moving toward the door, her head held higher than Marcus had ever seen it. Eleanor Morrison moved with them immediately, her presence a shield and a statement. "Come on," she said quietly to Diana. "You do not have to listen to any more of this. You do not deserve this treatment." But Marcus was not finished. His fury needed more targets, more victims. "That is right. Run away," he shouted after them. "Take your little thief with you. And when the police come asking questions about breaking and entering, about attempted theft, about conspiracy, do not be surprised. I have lawyers. I have resources. I have power. You have nothing. Absolutely nothing." The technicians filed out past them, their equipment cases bumping against the doorframe, creating dull thuds. Some of them looked back at Marcus with expressions ranging from pity to disgust to professional contempt. Christopher was still recording, his phone capturing every word, every threat, every revelation of character. As they moved through the study, past the open vault, Eleanor Morrison stopped suddenly. Her professional instincts, honed over decades of working with security systems and wealthy clients, kicked in powerfully. She looked at the contents of the vault, really looked at them with experienced eyes, and what she saw made her blood run cold with realization. Stacks of documents with offshore bank letterheads clearly visible. Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, British Virgin Islands, bearer bonds in denominations that made no sense whatsoever for legitimate business purposes. Folders marked with names she recognized from recent news reports about money laundering investigations and corporate fraud. And on top of one stack, partially visible, a spreadsheet showing two sets of numbers side by side. Revenue figures reported to the IRS versus actual revenue. The difference was staggering, impossible to explain legitimately. Eleanor pulled out her phone and quickly snapped several photographs. Her movements efficient and practiced. The open vault from multiple angles, the documents with their telltale letterheads, the incriminating spreadsheet. The evidence laid bare for anyone who knew what to look for. Behind her, Christopher noticed what she was doing and understood immediately. He zoomed in with his phone camera, capturing clear, high-resolution images of the offshore account statements, the suspicious bearer bonds, the spreadsheets that screamed fraud. Two other technicians, seeing what was happening and understanding its significance, did the same. Phones came out silently, camera shutters clicked digitally. Evidence was captured and stored in the cloud instantly, distributed across multiple servers, beyond Marcus's reach or control. "What are you doing?" Marcus shouted suddenly, realizing what was happening. "Stop immediately! That is private property. That is privileged information. You cannot photograph that." "That is evidence," Eleanor said coldly, pocketing her phone with deliberate calm. "Of what exactly I am not entirely sure yet. But I am bound by professional ethics to report certain things when I see them, and what I am seeing in that safe looks very much like financial fraud, tax evasion, money laundering." "Wells cannot prove anything," Marcus said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Those are legitimate business documents, legal holdings." "Then you have nothing to worry about," Eleanor replied, her tone making it clear she did not believe him for a second. "But I know what I saw, and so do they." She gestured to the other technicians, all of whom had their phones out, all of whom had captured images. The realization hit Marcus like a sledgehammer to the chest. His safe was not just open. Its contents were photographed, documented, distributed across multiple devices and multiple cloud accounts. The secrets he had worked so hard to hide, the evidence he had locked away so carefully, was now in the hands of strangers who had every reason to be hostile toward him after what they had just witnessed. "Get out," he said, his voice suddenly quiet, dangerous, completely different from his shouting. "All of you get out immediately before I call my lawyers, before I have you arrested for theft and invasion of privacy." "Already leaving," Eleanor said calmly. She turned to Diana, who was standing in the doorway, with Isaiah clutched against her. "Come on. You are riding with me. We need to talk about what happens next." They left together, Diana and Isaiah surrounded by technicians who had witnessed everything, equipment cases, laptops, tools, and phones full of evidence that would destroy Marcus Thornhill more thoroughly than any safecracker ever could, more completely than he could possibly imagine. The study emptied quickly, the sound of footsteps echoing through the mansion growing fainter and fainter. Car engines started outside in the driveway, vehicles pulled away down the long curved driveway toward the gates, and Marcus was alone, completely alone. He stood in the center of his study, surrounded by the debris of 6 days of failure, Shattered glass on the marble floor from his dropped and thrown whiskey glasses, empty bottles stacked near his desk, pages of attempted combinations scattered across every surface. Equipment cases left behind in the rush to leave, abandoned cables still snaking across the floor like mechanical serpents, and the vault, his fortress, his protection, standing open like a mouth screaming all his secrets to the world, exposing everything. Marcus walked slowly to the vault and looked inside with numb detachment. His treasure, his protection against the world. The thing he had spent $350,000 and 8 months designing to keep him safe from everyone and everything. Now it mocked him with its emptiness, its violation. He thought about closing it, spinning the lock, securing it again. But what was the point? The damage was catastrophically done and could not be undone. The combination was known by an 8-year-old child who would never forget it. The secrets were photographed and distributed digitally. The evidence was out in the world, beyond his control. Marcus collapsed into his desk chair, suddenly completely exhausted, drained of everything. The adrenaline that had fueled his rage was draining away rapidly, leaving only the crushing weight of consequences, of realization, of inevitable disaster approaching. He had assaulted a child on camera, multiple cameras. He had made explicitly racist statements in front of 14 witnesses. He had refused to honor a legally binding offer he had made and signed in desperation. And worst of all, absolutely worst of all, he had exposed the contents of his vault to people who knew exactly what to look for, who understood what they were seeing, who had the evidence to destroy him. The offshore accounts carefully hidden from tax authorities, the systematic tax evasion spanning over a decade, the money laundering through shell corporations, the fraud in government contracts that could send him to prison for decades, the evidence of bribery. His phone sat on his desk, dark and silent despite being plugged in. No more calls from his assistant or his lawyers or his CFO. It was after business hours now on a Friday evening. They had all gone home for the weekend, completely unaware that their boss had just destroyed himself and possibly the entire company in less than an hour of drunken rage. Marcus reached for the whiskey bottle on his desk, but his hand stopped halfway to it. More alcohol would not help anything now. Nothing would help now. Nothing could fix what he had broken. Through the window, the sun was setting over his estate in brilliant colors, 14 acres of perfectly manicured lawn stretching out before him, gardens worth millions, security systems that cost more than most people's houses, all of it designed to keep the world out, to keep him safe, to protect him from people he did not trust, from a world he saw as hostile and dangerous. But he had never protected himself from the one person who could actually hurt him most. Himself, his own paranoia, his own arrogance, his own hatred that had festered in his heart for so long he had forgotten it was not normal, not acceptable, not how humans were supposed to treat each other. An 8-year-old boy had opened his vault in 58 seconds using nothing but memory and courage. But Marcus Thornhill had been opening the door to his own destruction for years, one cruel comment at a time, one racist slur at a time, one assumption about his own superiority at a time. The vault was just the final lock clicking open, the final barrier falling. The real breach had happened long ago, years ago in his heart, where he had locked away his humanity and replaced it with contempt, with hatred, with the certainty that some people mattered less than others. Now everything was exposed in the dying light. The money, the fraud, the hatred, all of it visible, documented, photographed, saved to servers he could not access or control or delete. Marcus sat alone in his study as darkness fell completely outside his windows, the open vault looming before him in the shadows, like a headstone marking the death of everything he had built over 3 decades. His empire had not fallen yet, not completely, but the collapse had begun, and it would be spectacular. And unlike his vault, There was no combination that could lock the damage back inside, no way to reverse what had been set in motion. The only question now was how fast and how far he would fall, and whether anyone would be there to witness his landing, or if he would be as alone then as he was right now in this moment. Outside in Eleanor Morrison's car, Diana held her son close and stared at the mansion receding in the rearview mirror, growing smaller and smaller until it disappeared. Isaiah had stopped crying finally, but his small body still shook against hers with residual fear and shock. "What happens now?" Diana whispered, her voice barely audible, almost afraid to ask. Eleanor's hands tightened on the steering wheel, her jaw set with determination. "Now," she said firmly, "we make sure that man pays for absolutely everything he has done. To you, to your son, to everyone he has ever hurt." She glanced at her phone sitting in the cup holder, full of photographic evidence that would bring down a billionaire, that would expose crimes and racism and cruelty. "Now," Eleanor said with absolute conviction, "justice happens. Whether he thinks he is too powerful or not, justice is coming for Marcus Thornhill." Eleanor Morrison sat in her car outside a 24-hour diner, her laptop open on the passenger seat, her phone connected to the vehicle's mobile hotspot, creating a wireless bubble. It was 11:38 at night. Diana and Isaiah had gone inside to get something to eat, the boy finally calm enough to feel hungry after the trauma. Eleanor had told them she needed to make some calls, handle some professional business. What she was actually doing was uploading videos that would change everything. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency and clear purpose. She had already edited the footage into a coherent narrative that told the complete story without requiring additional context. Marcus's drunken offer, captured clearly on audio from multiple sources. Isaiah's polite, respectful request to try opening the vault. Marcus's racist mockery, every vile word preserved in high definition. The moment the vault opened after 6 days of expert failure. Marcus's violent assault on an 8-year-old child, shaking him, grabbing him by the shirt. His refusal to honor his signed promise, his explicit reasons why. The threats against Diana's livelihood and future employment. It was all there, 17 minutes of footage that told a complete and damning story. Eleanor uploaded it to 4 platforms simultaneously: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. She titled it simply and factually, "Billionaire CEO offers $200 million to open vault, then assaults 8-year-old who succeeds in 60 seconds." Then she began texting the links to every journalist contact she had accumulated over 20 years in her field, every civil rights organization she knew of, every lawyer friend who had ever talked about fighting workplace discrimination and racism. "This needs to be seen widely," she wrote in each message. "Witness testimony available, multiple camera angles, clear audio, signed documentation." She hit send on 27 messages and closed her laptop, leaning back in her seat with grim satisfaction. Within 3 hours, the videos had accumulated 15,000 views across all platforms. By 4 in the morning, 120,000 people had watched Marcus Thornhill reveal himself. By dawn, as the sun rose over the city, the number had crossed 3 million and was climbing exponentially, with no signs of slowing. The algorithm had caught it, flagged it as trending, pushed it to more feeds. Hashtag Pay Isaiah began trending at 5:17 in the morning. Hashtag Justice for Isaiah followed at 7:23. The footage was devastating in its absolute clarity, in its lack of ambiguity. There was no way to misinterpret what viewers were seeing. They watched a small, polite 8-year-old boy solve an impossible problem in under 60 seconds, while enduring explicitly racial abuse from a man 3 times his size. They watched him be physically grabbed, violently shaken, threatened. They watched his mother shoved into a wall when she tried to protect him. They watched a billionaire refuse to honor a legally binding promise specifically and explicitly because of the child's race, because of his skin color, because of assumptions about his worth as a human being. The comment sections across all platforms exploded with outrage that was raw and genuine. People shared their own stories of workplace racism, of being underestimated and dismissed because of their skin color, of watching their children face discrimination in schools and public spaces. The video became more than just documentation of one incident. It became a symbol, a focal point, a rallying cry. By 9 in the morning, major news outlets were picking up the story and running segments. CNN devoted 15 minutes to it during their morning broadcast, bringing in legal experts to discuss the binding nature of Marcus's offer, the assault charges he could face. MSNBC interviewed 3 child psychologists who reviewed the footage and confirmed that eidetic memory was rare but real, well documented in medical literature, and that Isaiah's demonstration was consistent with that condition. Fox News covered it too, though their commentary was more measured, questioning whether the video showed the full context, whether there might be more to the story. But the context was right there in the footage, 17 minutes of unedited reality showing exactly what happened from multiple angles with clear audio. Civil rights organizations issued formal statements by mid-morning. The NAACP called for a comprehensive investigation into Marcus's business practices and personal conduct. The National Action Network demanded prosecution for assault and strict enforcement of the contract. The ACLU offered free legal representation to Diana and Isaiah, pledging their full resources to the case. Then celebrities with massive platforms got involved, amplifying the story to tens of millions of additional followers. A Grammy-winning artist with 43 million followers shared the video with a caption that resonated deeply. "This is America right here. A child solves the impossible and gets assaulted for it because of his skin color. This man needs to pay every single dollar he promised, greater than pay Isaiah. And a beloved actor tweeted to her 37 million followers, "I have watched this video 3 times and I feel physically sick. This is exactly why we cannot stop talking about systemic racism. It is not in the past. It is right here, on camera, happening to an 8-year-old child who did nothing wrong. Greater than justice for Isaiah." A professional athlete with enormous influence posted, "That little boy has more courage in his small body than that billionaire has in his entire life. Pay him what you promised. Honor your word. Greater than pay Isaiah." The shares multiplied exponentially. The views climbed into the tens of millions by midday. By afternoon, it had crossed 50 million views globally. Marcus Thornhill woke at 10:47 on Saturday morning to his phone exploding with notifications, hundreds of them, thousands, creating a constant buzzing that would not stop. Calls from his board of directors sounding panicked. Emails from his corporate partners with urgent subject lines. Text messages from his PR team that escalated from concerned to absolutely panicked to desperately begging for response. He ignored them all initially and opened Twitter through bleary, hungover eyes. His name was trending nationwide, dominating the conversation completely. Not just trending, but occupying 4 of the top 10 trending topics. The video was everywhere, unavoidable, playing on every feed. His face, red with alcohol and rage, was being screenshotted and shared millions of times. His words, his racist mockery of an 8-year-old, were being quoted in tweet after tweet after tweet. "Oh God," he whispered, his hangover suddenly the absolute least of his problems, barely registering. By 11:30, his business partners were calling emergency meetings and issuing public statements. The CEO of Mega Retail, Marcus's largest distributor, representing 40% of his revenue, held a press conference that was live-streamed. We are immediately reviewing our relationship with Thornhill Enterprises in light of these deeply disturbing allegations. We do not tolerate racism or violence in any form, period. We are suspending all orders pending investigation. By 1 p.m, 4 major retailers had announced they were pulling his products from their shelves, effective immediately. Corporate partners were issuing statements distancing themselves from him, protecting their own brands. Investors were demanding emergency explanations, threatening to pull funding. His stock price, publicly traded, had dropped 28% in 3 hours of trading before the exchange halted it. By 3 p.m, protesters had begun gathering outside his estate. 60 people at first, then 150, then over 300. They held signs reading, "Pay Isaiah, Black Excellence Matters, Children Deserve Dignity." News vans lined the street outside his gates, their satellite dishes extended, reporters doing live broadcasts with his mansion visible in the background. More protesters gathered outside his corporate headquarters downtown, a building he had been so proud of. Office workers inside sent nervous texts to HR, asking if they should come to work Monday, asking if the company would survive this scandal. Some started discreetly updating their resumes on LinkedIn. But Marcus's problems were about to get exponentially worse in ways he could not imagine. Federal investigators had seen the videos too, had been sent them by concerned citizens, not the social media posts, but the original high-resolution footage that Christopher and Eleanor had sent directly to authorities with detailed explanations. The footage that included clear, unobstructed shots of the vault's contents, the offshore account statements with damning letterheads, the bearer bonds in suspicious denominations, the incriminating spreadsheets showing 2 sets of financial numbers. Eleanor had spent Saturday morning on the phone with her lawyer, explaining in detail what she had witnessed, what she had photographed. Then she had been transferred to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, then to the IRS's Criminal Investigation Unit, then to the Securities and Exchange Commission. "Yes," she told each agency patiently, "I have high-resolution photographs of the documents. Yes, I can testify under oath to what I saw. Yes, I believe those documents show clear evidence of systematic fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. I have been working with high-net-worth clients for 20 years. I know what legitimate financial documentation looks like. This was not that." 72 hours after Isaiah opened the vault, federal agents executed search warrants on Marcus's properties with overwhelming force. His mansion, his office, his vacation home in the Hamptons, his mother's house where he stored additional documents. They came with dozens of boxes, forensic accountants, computer specialists, and an itemized list of what they were looking for. What they found was far worse than the glimpses captured in the videos. Detailed, meticulous records of tax evasion spanning 17 years. Evidence of systematic money laundering through shell corporations in 5 countries. Fraud in government contracts worth hundreds of millions. Bribery of foreign officials documented in emails and wire transfers. The custom vault had protected Marcus's secrets for 8 months. Now those secrets were being catalogued item by item, photographed page by page, and prepared for prosecution that would be devastating. Marcus's board of directors held an emergency meeting on day 4, Sunday evening. Investors were in full panic mode, threatening to pull all funding immediately. The stock price had dropped 53% overall before trading was halted indefinitely. Lawsuits were being filed by shareholders, by business partners, by customers. The company's reputation was in absolute free fall, possibly irrecoverable. They voted unanimously to demand Marcus's immediate resignation as CEO and from the board. When he refused, citing his ownership stake and his contract, they voted to remove him for cause. When his lawyer threatened to fight it aggressively in court, They showed him the evidence from the federal investigation and the terms of his employment contract's morality clause that he had signed years ago. They showed him the video footage that had now been viewed by over 70 million people globally. They showed him the lawsuits, the criminal investigation, the complete destruction of his reputation. Marcus resigned that evening, his statement released through his lawyer, cold and brief, offering no apology and no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just a technical resignation effective immediately. Meanwhile, across town in a small legal aid office, Diana sat with Isaiah as lawyers explained their options in detail. They had been absolutely overwhelmed with offers of representation, dozens of them. The ACLU, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, 5 major civil rights law firms, a coalition of employment discrimination attorneys who wanted to take the case pro bono for the precedent it would set. They chose the coalition carefully after interviewing each group. 7 lawyers working together, each specializing in a different aspect of what had happened. 1 expert in contract law, 1 in employment discrimination, 1 in civil rights violations, 1 in assault cases, 1 in wrongful termination, 1 in workplace harassment, 1 in damages and compensation. The lawsuits were filed within a week, each one carefully crafted, thoroughly documented. Breach of contract for the $200 million offer, supported by Marcus's signed document, video evidence, and 14 witnesses who submitted sworn affidavits. Wrongful termination for Diana, with evidence of 10 years of documented exemplary service and explicitly discriminatory treatment. Hostile work environment, supported by years of racist comments that former staff members had saved in text messages, emails, voice recordings. Assault of a minor, with video evidence so clear and unambiguous that criminal charges were filed simultaneously by the district attorney. Emotional distress for both Diana and Isaiah, for years of degradation, abuse, and trauma. Then something unexpected happened that changed the scope of everything. Other former employees saw the news coverage and started coming forward, first hesitantly, then in increasing numbers. A former driver, who had been paid significantly less than his white counterparts for identical work, a Latina maintenance worker who had been passed over for promotion repeatedly while less qualified white employees advanced. A black executive assistant who had endured years of racial comments disguised as jokes, documented in emails she had saved. Dozens of them came forward, then scores, then over 80, all with similar stories of discrimination, harassment, and abuse, all with documentation they had saved, knowing someday it might matter. A class action lawsuit emerged organically, representing 93 former employees. The pattern was undeniable, systematic, documented across years. Discrimination in pay, promotion, and treatment, a corporate culture built on racism and enabled by Marcus's power and wealth. The evidence was overwhelming. The media coverage intensified dramatically. Marcus became a symbol of everything wrong with corporate America, with unchecked wealth and power. His case was discussed endlessly on cable news, dissected in think pieces, analyzed in academic papers about workplace racism. Legal experts debated the case on television. Civil rights leaders used it as an example in speeches. It became a cultural touchstone, a reference point. The public relations firm Marcus hired to salvage his reputation quickly resigned when they realized the task was impossible. Another firm took the case for an enormous fee, then also resigned 2 weeks later. A third firm attempted damage control, but everything they tried backfired spectacularly, making things worse. Marcus agreed to one interview, against his lawyer's strong advice, with a journalist known for softballs. It was a complete disaster from the first question. The assault was taken out of context, Marcus insisted, his face tense. I was under extreme stress. I had been drinking. That does not excuse what I did, but people need to understand the full situation. The interviewer had been reading, the manual was trained. The manual was trained and had been using the context and had been showing the way, and had been showing and having and training to prepare for this. They showed and prepared and showed the context of multiple manual training and showed the 17 minutes of video. They showed and prepared and showing and manual and trained showing and prepared showing to see, and showed to see the moments of manual showing and trained for this, and prepared and showed to see the context, full showing and having to prepared showing, and trained showing and trained showing and showed and seeing the full contexts, and prepared showing and seeing the manual showing and seeing that the child must have been coached by his mother. Marcus insisted, despite all evidence showing otherwise. There is no other possible explanation. I do not believe in this so-called photographic memory. The interviewer cited 4 child psychologists who had reviewed the footage and published papers confirming Isaiah's demonstrated eidetic memory was consistent with documented cases. "I never technically assaulted anyone," Marcus claimed desperately. "I was just trying to get answers." The interviewer played the video of him grabbing Isaiah by the shirt, lifting him off the ground, shaking him violently while the child cried, showing Diana into the wall. Every answer Marcus gave made things catastrophically worse. Every defense revealed more of his character, more of his inability to accept responsibility. The interview was cut short when Marcus walked out after 23 minutes, calling the journalist biased and unprofessional and part of a conspiracy against him. That clip went viral too, shared millions of times, more evidence of his character. More evidence emerged from unexpected sources. A former housekeeper came forward with audio recordings of Marcus using explicit racial slurs, recordings she had made secretly over 2 years of employment. A former business partner shared emails showing Marcus's discriminatory hiring practices spelled out explicitly. An ex-wife gave a detailed interview describing his prejudices in their private life, his views on race and class that he expressed freely behind closed doors. The empire Marcus had built over 30 years was collapsing completely in 30 days. His mansion, once a fortress of wealth and power and privilege, became a prison. Protesters outside the gates 24 hours a day. Process servers delivering lawsuit notifications constantly. Federal agents returning repeatedly with additional warrants. News helicopters circling overhead capturing footage. He could not leave without being photographed, recorded, confronted. Marcus stood at his study window on day 29, looking out at the protesters who had been there for weeks, at the media that would not leave, at the complete dismantling of everything he had built. The vault behind him was still open, emptied completely now by federal investigators who had catalogued every document, every bearer bond, every piece of evidence of his crimes. His phone rang, cutting through his thoughts. His lawyer calling again. "The prosecution is offering a plea deal," the lawyer said, his voice exhausted. "If you plead guilty to the tax evasion and fraud charges, they will recommend 18 years in federal prison instead of 30. "And if I fight it?" Marcus asked, though he already knew. "With the evidence they have, with your statements in that disastrous interview, with testimony from 93 former employees, Marcus, you will lose. The evidence is overwhelming, and the sentence will be longer, possibly much longer. Plus, the civil cases are going to destroy you financially, regardless of the criminal outcome. The $200 million contract is ironclad with multiple witnesses and your signature. The assault charge has video evidence that juries will find devastating. The discrimination suits have documentation from dozens of plaintiffs spanning years. You will lose everything." Marcus closed his eyes, his hand trembling as he held the phone. How did this happen? How did everything fall apart so completely? "You tell me," the lawyer replied with barely controlled frustration. "You are the one who offered $200 million to a room full of witnesses while drunk. You are the one who assaulted an 8-year-old child on camera with multiple people recording. You are the one who kept incriminating financial documents in a vault and then let that vault be opened in front of technicians with smartphones who knew what they were looking at. Marcus ended the call without responding and threw his phone onto his desk. He poured himself a whiskey, then stopped mid-pour. Alcohol had caused this initial disaster. Alcohol and arrogance and hatred that he had carried for so long, he had forgotten it was not normal, not acceptable, not how humans were supposed to treat each other. Outside, the protesters began a chant that had become familiar over the weeks, their voices rising together. Pay Isaiah, pay Isaiah, pay Isaiah. The sound drifted up through the closed windows, through all his security systems, through all his walls and gates, inescapable, unending, relentless. Marcus Thornhill stood alone in his study, watching his empire burn, and realized with terrible clarity that sometimes the fortress you build to protect yourself from the world becomes the tomb you die in. The reckoning had come, and it was absolute and unavoidable. 1 year and 3 months later, Marcus Thornhill stood before a federal judge in a courtroom packed with media representatives, former employees, civil rights activists, and people who had never met him but felt they knew exactly who he was from the video they had seen. They had all seen the video. The entire world had seen it. The trial had consumed 9 months of his life. His lawyers, expensive and experienced, had tried every defense strategy available. They argued the $200 million offer was made under duress while he was intoxicated. The judge reviewed the video evidence and Marcus's signed written document multiple times, consulted precedent, then ruled it a legally binding contract made in front of 14 witnesses with clear documentation. They claimed Marcus never intended the offer to apply to a minor child. The prosecution played compilation clips of him saying anyone repeatedly with no qualifications, no restrictions, no exclusions specified. They tried to minimize the assault as a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. The video showed him grabbing an 8-year-old child, lifting him off the ground by his shirt, shaking him violently while the child screamed and cried. Medical records documented significant bruising on Isaiah's arms and chest where Marcus had gripped him. They attempted to separate the financial crimes from the discrimination cases, but the prosecutors wove them together masterfully, showing a clear pattern of behavior spanning decades. A man who believed rules did not apply to him, who thought his wealth and power placed him above the law and above basic human decency, who treated people as objects to be used or discarded based on their usefulness and their race. The hate crime enhancement was applied based on the extensively documented pattern of racial discrimination. Years of text messages explicitly referencing race, emails with discriminatory language, recorded conversations from multiple former employees spanning over a decade, Marcus's own words from the viral video that had been viewed over 200 million times globally, his racist mockery captured in high definition for the world to witness. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, crushing. The jury deliberated for 5 hours across 2 days, guilty on all counts, every single charge. Diana was quiet for a long moment, sitting in their comfortable kitchen, thinking carefully about the question her son had asked. The fear she had felt, the violence, the terror of watching her child be assaulted, the months of court proceedings and constant media attention, the way their lives had been turned completely inside out, examined under microscope, judged by millions of strangers, but also the justice that had followed, the vindication, the 93 other families who had found compensation and closure, the foundation they were building to help others facing similar situations. The fact that Marcus Thornhill could never hurt anyone else again, never wield his wealth as a weapon against vulnerable people. "No," she said finally, her voice certain. I would not have stopped you, because staying silent was killing us slowly anyway, in a different way. Every single day of pretending his treatment was acceptable, of teaching you to be invisible, of accepting less than we deserved as human beings, that was its own kind of death, a slow death of the spirit. Speaking up was terrifying, absolutely terrifying, but it led to justice, not just for us, but for dozens of others who suffered the same way for years. Malachi, Isaiah nodded thoughtfully, processing her words with his characteristic intense focus. What destroyed Mr. Thornhill was not really my memory, or the vault, was it? No, baby, Diana said softly. It was his own hatred, his complete inability to see value in you because of the color of your skin, his refusal to honor his word because he considered you beneath him as a human being. The vault was designed to protect him from the external world and external threats, but he never protected himself from what was festering in his own heart, from his own prejudices and cruelty. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, then returned to their work. Diana to her nursing school studies, a degree she was pursuing now that she had the resources and time. Isaiah to his advanced mathematics homework from the gifted program at his new private school, one of the best in the state. But Diana's mind wandered as she looked around their home, thinking about the extraordinary journey they had traveled together. From that cramped apartment with the leaky faucet and rattling ceiling fan, to this house with its yard and garden and promise of security. From forced invisibility to being seen, truly seen and valued. From enforced silence to speaking truth to power and being heard. She thought about all the other children out there right now in similar situations. Brilliant and gifted and systematically dismissed because of their skin color, their economic circumstances, their zip code. All the parents enduring workplace abuse in silence, afraid to speak up because they desperately need the job, need the income, need to survive. How many other Isaiahs were being told right now that they did not belong in certain spaces, that they should aim lower, that their kind would never amount to anything significant? How many other Dianas were teaching their children to be invisible, to accept mistreatment, to survive by disappearing into the background? The work of the Carter Foundation would continue and expand. The fight against discrimination would go on. Because for every Marcus Thornhill exposed and held accountable, many others remained hidden, their prejudice protected by power and wealth and silence. But change was genuinely possible. Justice could actually prevail. Sometimes in 60 seconds of courage, sometimes in 18 months of legal battles and public pressure. But it could happen when people chose to act. Diana looked at her son, his head bent over his advanced homework, his brilliant mind engaged with complex problems that challenged and excited him. A child who could have been broken by hatred and cruelty, but instead became a symbol of resilience and justice, of courage and truth. "I love you, baby," she said softly. Isaiah looked up from his work and smiled, that beautiful smile that lit up his whole face. "I love you too, Mama." They returned to their studies, their quiet evening in their safe, warm home. A home built not on money alone, though the financial settlement had certainly helped, but built on courage, on the decision to stand up and demand basic dignity, on the refusal to accept that some people matter less than others, on the insistence that all humans deserve respect. Outside their windows, the world continued turning. Somewhere right now, injustice was happening to someone. Somewhere, someone was being told they did not matter because of their race, their economic class, their circumstances of birth. But also somewhere, someone was watching and recording and preparing to speak up, refusing to stay silent, finding their courage, The story of Marcus Thornhill and Isaiah Carter would be told for years and decades to come, in classrooms teaching about civil rights, in boardrooms discussing ethical leadership, in legal seminars examining contract law and workplace discrimination, in ethics courses exploring the consequences of unchecked power and prejudice, a reminder that power without compassion is tyranny, that wealth without humanity is worthless and destructive, that sometimes the people we casually dismiss possess exactly the gifts and courage we need. And sometimes justice takes exactly 60 seconds to arrive when someone is brave enough to reach for it. The question, as it always has been and always will be, remained for everyone. What will you do when you witness injustice happening in front of you? Will you stay silent out of fear or convenience? Or will you speak up despite the risks? Will you be the person who records the video and shares it? Who offers legal help to those who cannot afford it? Who stands physically between an abuser and their victim? Or will you look away, assuming it is not your problem, not your fight, not your responsibility to get involved? Isaiah Carter chose courage when it would have been far easier and safer to stay silent in his corner. His mother Diana chose to let him try despite her fear, despite knowing the risks. Eleanor Morrison chose to document everything and report what she witnessed to authorities. 93 former employees chose to come forward with their stories and their evidence, despite potential retaliation. Their collective choices, their acts of courage large and small, brought down an empire built on hatred and exposed a system that had allowed it to flourish unchallenged for decades. One choice, one moment, one small voice saying clearly, "May I attempt it?" Sometimes that is all it takes to change absolutely everything, to shift the trajectory of multiple lives, to expose truth that needs to be seen. The end of this story is not truly an ending at all. It is a beginning. For every family, the Carter Foundation helps escape similar situations. For every child who sees Isaiah's example and refuses to accept artificial limits placed on them by prejudice and discrimination. For every person who witnesses injustice and chooses to act rather than look away. The vault is open now. Not Marcus's physical vault with its titanium walls and mechanical lock, but the metaphorical vault where society locks away uncomfortable truths about racism, discrimination, systematic inequality, and the abuse of power. The combination that opened it was courage combined with documentation, the refusal to accept that some human beings are worth less than others, and the insistence that promises must be kept and justice must be served regardless of wealth and power. And once a vault like that is opened wide, you cannot close it again. The truth is out in the light. The evidence is preserved and distributed. All that remains is the choice each person makes. Will we use what we have learned to build something genuinely better? Will we demand accountability from those in power? Will we stand with the vulnerable against their oppressors? Diana and Isaiah Carter believed with absolute conviction the answer was yes. Their foundation was proof of that belief made concrete. Their lives were living proof. And somewhere tonight, another child is watching their story, learning from their example, gathering courage to speak when it would be easier to stay silent. Another 60 seconds is waiting to change everything for someone. Another vault of injustice is waiting to be opened by someone brave enough to try. The question is not whether injustice exists. We know it does, everywhere, every day. The question is what you will do when you see it, when you witness it, when it happens in front of you or to you. Will you be the one who tries? Will you be the one who records and reports? Will you be the one who offers help? Or will you be the one who looks away and pretends not to see? Isaiah was 8 years old when he made his choice. What is your excuse for staying silent? Thank you for staying with this story until its conclusion. The journey of Isaiah and Diana Carter reminds us that courage comes in many forms and sizes, that justice delayed is not always justice denied when people fight for it, and that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful truths. Their story is not unique. Similar injustices happen every day in workplaces, schools, and homes across the world. What makes their story special is that they chose to fight back, to demand accountability, to refuse to accept that their mistreatment was simply the price of survival. And they won, not easily, not quickly, but they won because they refused to stay silent, because others chose to help them, because the evidence was undeniable when brought to light. May their courage inspire your own when the moment comes, as it inevitably will, when you must choose between convenient silence and difficult truth. The vaults around us are numerous. Some are made of titanium and sophisticated locks. Others are made of systemic silence and accepted prejudice. All of them can be opened by those brave enough to try, persistent enough to keep trying, and supported by others who refuse to look away. The combination is always the same: courage, truth, solidarity, and the fundamental belief that all human beings deserve dignity and justice, regardless of who they are, where they come from, or what they look like.